Morning, everybody. Oh, it's afternoon for a change. Never mind. Yeah, a few hours late today on this idea, but I wanted to record part 3 of my little video series on the current state of retail trading. Right. The first video was on the blind dogma retail traders tend to take towards their strategy, just accepting what they were told works as fact without taking the time to question ever why it works. And this really leads to the problem of, well, nobody really knows why a lot of things work in trading other than, and these are my foremost common answers I hear, everybody else uses it. It's a proven standard. It's nature's law. See, like Fibonacci, people always like to say, oh, well, it happens in nature, so it obviously happens in trading as well, right? And of course, everyone's favorite, it's worked in the past, so it will work again, right? Prior performance does not indicate future performance. So, really, if you just leave a retail investor to garner a larger sample size of trades, chances are they're going to have a very bad time in the long run. We actually have statistics that says they're most likely going to have a bad time in the long run, right? It's that comfort that people settle into that ruins them, right? Without a drive to improve, you kind of screw yourself in the long run because there are people out there with more tools, resources, time, effort, and so on than you. And all chances are they're going to end up with your money one way or another if you choose to keep trading, right? So, most important part of what I'm about to say here is find a better way, but it doesn't have to be my way. I highly recommend you look into how to use Ichimoku clouds with the adjusted cryptocurrency 24-hour settings, okay? If not my way, use that way, right? So, like, this video is just not for me to show my content. I'm here to say, find a better way to do things, and I'm offering you a free alternative. Next up is Macro to Micro by Mark Whistler. If you also want, I guess you got to pay $3 for that one, right? It's an ebook. You can start there and actually get the foundations of my strategy. And now I'm actually going to talk about what I personally use and what I have actually come to a full understanding of, right? If somebody asked me a question of why does what I use work, I'd be able to dive very in depth as to each function of every tool I use and how it's calculated and why it works, and most importantly, what fundamental paradigms these indicators represent, okay? It looks like my chart is very complicated, but in reality, all I have is 3 Bollinger Bands, CCI, which is just a mean absolute deviation representation of the 1.25 standard deviation of a Bollinger Band, Wave PM, which is a lateral representation of the compression and expansion of a distribution's relative period, and 3D Wave PM. 32 separate periods, which have taken readings from 3D Wave PM and turned it into a heat map. And the heat map is really what gives us the strongest tools in my arsenal. Lateral trading will be defined by the longest overexpanded period, right? That's the simplest and most easily understood part of my strategy, and it's also one of the most effective, which is why I really like to present this piece of information, okay? You can very reliably trade mean reversions with this kind of information for the following reason. Price will always compress as defined by the 1.25 standard deviation of a compressing distribution because a compressing distribution requires an excessive amount of force to resume its expansion, right? If you have excessive mass, it's obviously going to take excessive force to move. So, in this particular example, right, if we mouse over 3D Wave PM and look at this area, right, this move here generated mass, okay? And the mass expanded all the way up to the 70 period. So if we load up a 70 period Bollinger Band, price will trade laterally as defined by that 70 period as long as its mass reading is above the 0.7 value on the wave PM, or if it turns green on the 3D wave PM. So let's actually zoom in on this so you guys can understand what I'm talking about here, right? So see how this red plume generates up to the 70 period? This right here, okay? That means as soon as the 1.25 standard deviation, which is an empirical constant for the expansion and compression of a distribution, price will trade laterally as defined by that 1.25 standard deviation until it turns green, which happens right here. So price will not leave the band until it turns green. So guess what this means for us? From here to right here, right, because this is where it turned green, price will stay inside this blue band. Okay? And what does that mean for us? Mean reversion to the 70 mean is implied. Price will retrace to this value. And then, even better yet, are the small scalp positions you can actually get from this kind of information. We're long positions here and here because price cannot leave the 1.25 standard deviation because it would cause the re-expansion of the distribution, right? Let's look at the 3.2 standard deviation of the 70 period so you can understand the exaggerated edges of what's happening. You're going to love this, okay? So, right at this location, the 70 distribution begins compressing. You'll notice it compresses until it tags outside, and then it begins a small period of expansion, albeit the edges don't show it very clearly in this example. But you can repeatedly take longs on the bottom and shorts on the top as long as you're in that compressing period. And this happens around with 90% accuracy, and I'm not making that value up. I'm going to take the time to load up a mass indicator, or rather an adaptive Bollinger Band that immediately adjusts itself to the longest overexpanded period, okay? And, sorry, I have a lot of invite-only indicators here. Mean reversion MA 600 max. Okay, this will take quite some time to load because it's the equivalent of loading over 32 indicators onto a chart. So we're going to do it manually until it does load. And most likely this video is going to start lagging because of what I just did there. But really, the point I'm making here is if you know why something works, it's going to work a lot more often because you're going to know what conditions would make it fail. All right, you're going to love this. We're only going to have the adaptive Bollinger Band loaded here for a second. And this should blow your mind. Okay? Every time price enters the blue band, it goes to the pink mean with around 95% accuracy. We re-enter the blue band, we return to the mean. We re-enter the blue band, we return to the mean. We re-enter the blue band, we return to the mean. And let's zoom in a bit, so you guys can really understand the scalping potential here. Never before have I seen an indicator with this kind of reliability. Enter the blue band, we return to the mean. Enter the blue band, we return to the mean. And yes, there is high price volatility at these key pivots, which requires proper risk management. However, well, that's where the entire strategy comes in, right? If I just load an indicator on the chart with just a single metric to determine my long and short positions, well, obviously there's a whole system with every other indicator here to actually properly manage the risk, right? All I'm showing you here is the consistency of the signals that are generated from trading the longest overexpanded period and its relative compression. Now, interestingly enough, you'll notice that this particular instance failed, and that actually has to do with the volatility overhead of the 3D wave PM, where if longer periods begin their re-expansion, like in this instance here, it will actually cause that mean reversion to technically fail. So my point is, guys, and I have released 7 hours of content on just exactly how this works. Really, guys, I can't make this up. If you want to learn more about these indicators, do follow, do click the links in the signature, and do send me messages. I'm happy to answer any potential questions you may have. From the looks of it, Did they increase the ideal length? Oh, they did. I can go more than 10 minutes. Huh. They must have changed that. Okay. Well, I'm very happy about that, so now I can keep talking about this. I'm pretty sure it was going to cut me off at 10 minutes there. Cool. So, that gives me time to make a bit of an outro here. And gives me a second to breathe. Oh my god. I was just ranting there. My point is, if somebody draws a trend line on their chart, like so, why does the trend line work? Right? It's probably one of the 4 reasons that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. And the problem with this is everyone can see that information, and you will be abused because of it. If an institutional investor knows where you draw your trend lines, and he needs to fill his orders, he's just going to push price around and destroy you. I have a really good example of this, RVN, BTC. I actually went over this in one of my private lessons the other day because it was just such a clean idea. Okay. And we're just going to use price action here for a second, and we're going to pop down the 1 hour chart. Okay. So, at the beginning of trend continuation for Raven coin, excuse me. Right, we had this beautiful, obvious trend line that shot up right through here. And actually, when I was teaching my student this, you know what he did when I asked him to draw this trend line? He did this. And oh my god, it just killed me, right? Because trend lines just become so subjective with people when people choose how to use them, right? Everybody can see this data and it's going to get abused, right? The real trend line was this. And let's get that as accurate as possible. Okay, all right. So, somebody knows that Raven coin is going to moon, right? There's been heavy accumulation. Let's have the volume candles visible just so we can understand this, right? There's a lot of buying pressure. Somebody wants to fill all their buy orders. So what do? This obvious trend line, where's your stop loss? It's below the trend line, right? Institutional investors will push it down, scoop up your stop losses, and recontinue the trend with quite some success, right? So here's the point, guys. If you use dynamic indications for trend, like say the expansion and compression of a distribution, 1, your liquidity won't be abused, and 2, you're going to get much more accurate entries, right? Like let's just assume quad CCI. If we have every single CCI period loaded up on the same side, so that means every single wave PM period is above, or rather in the state of expansion, right? When that 14 period CCI rolls down and scoops back up, well, guess what that means? It's like you have a seesaw, and you have, that's your 200 period, that's your 100 period, and that's your 50 period, right? They're all weighted over here. So what happens when your 14 period is just a tiny little guy over here, right? Oops. Right, let's just assume that this line right here is the middle of the seesaw, or the mean, right? The center of data. So if we have our 14 period over here, and it rolls over with all the other periods, that's obviously trend continuation, right? But what happens if the 14 period is rolling this way, right? Eventually, if it technically rolled far enough, and let's just assume the seesaw is infinitely long, right? Enough leverage would be applied so the other periods roll back to the bullish side. But guess what? What happens when this ball starts rolling back toward the center of data, towards the center of mass? When this little ball rolls over here and it starts to roll towards the center of the data, you aren't going to bet that it's going to reverse and start going this way again, right? That's what this signal is right here, where you have every period weighted to the same side, and then your 14 period implies trend continuation by rolling up. And guess what, guys? Even though I did cherry pick this example, using this to actually get trend continuation is insane. Why? Well, think about this. If you are just buying on the trend line, well, you're going to get abused. It's not going to be that accurate of information. But if you're using logic and physics and something other, oh, well, it's on the trend line, so I'm going to buy because it's the proven standard. No. If you use physics analogies to actually scope out your entries and play this correctly, you're going to have a much easier time trading, right? Because guess what? With my strategy, right, that CCI roll-up right there, you're stopping out and I'm scooping up your entries. That's the beauty of this, guys. It's intuitive. It makes sense. So if you liked this video and if you've liked the last, this little series I've made, so to say, I very much do recommend checking out my website. I do offer one-on-one lessons and a course as well. Again, it's 7 hours of me ranting like this about everything I know in trading. And you can check the testimonials as well. And, you know, if you think I'm selling snake oil, then go ahead and check out the spreadsheet I have in the signature of this video. It's over 100 trades I've taken, or rather 100 public trades that I've called over the last almost a year now. So if really, again, I'll show myself one more time. Like and subscribe. It has been a pleasure. Oh, wow. That was fun. Yeah. You can hear me chew if you want. Listen to that. It's good stuff.